Does this have to be here? Or? Space for paper. Is it? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. There were a few questions that came on the group and some that were asked just throughout the week. But because the attendance is kind of light, maybe we'll just hold off on answering those until the next time. And I brought something to share with you guys a little bit off the topic of al-Tahara. So I guess we'll deal with that. But before I begin, I just want to mention how important it is. To see yourself, to see yourself in the lectures, see yourself in the classes. Anybody know what that means? See yourself in the classes?
Yeah.
What does that mean, Habib?
To not always think you're talking about this brother here, that brother there. This pertains to you.
I said that basically whatever is said in the class, you do a self-reflection and you apply it to yourself. And what we have a tendency to do is when we are in a class, we start looking around, whether we're actually looking around physically at people in the class and saying, yeah, that's that person, or talking about that person. Or we look around in our life, people that we're either associated with, related to, or people that we've come in contact with, and we start applying the lecture to them. And at no point do we find ourselves in the lecture in our violations. Another thing is that people have this tendency to have a victim complex, that they're always the victim. So if you talk about stinginess, they've always been the victim of what? Stinginess. If you talk about people being inconsiderate, they've always been the victim of what? People's inconsideration. It's always that somebody did these things to them, but they never reflect upon how they do it to other people. And this is why we have these durus, we have these lessons, and we don't see a lot of what? Improvement and growth. It's because people don't go home and look in the mirror and say, yeah, that's me. I have issues with that. I need to work on that. People don't do that. People are always talking about how the next man, if he would just get himself together, everything would be all right. But that wasn't the way of the early Muslims. The early Muslims would hear a talk about the hypocrites, and they would think that it was about them. And the Prophet wasn't talking about them. They were the companions, they were the believers, but they would think it was about them. They would always apply everything to them, to themselves. And that's what made them the best of people, because they were always seeking to improve themselves. They were always doing introspection, looking at themselves. And unfortunately, the reason why we're not improving the way we should is because it's always somebody else. It's always this person, that person. It's never us. And that's why we stagnate, because we're perfect. There's nothing wrong with us. It's just everybody else around us who's what? Who's failing and falling short. So I want to just mention that every lecture you sit in, you need to self-reflect and you need to apply what you hear to yourself. And you can't be the person who, it's never you. It's never applicable to you. Who in the world, it's never applicable to them. There's never anything wrong with them. They never do anything wrong. Who is that? That doesn't exist. But with that said, the topic of the talk, or the primary topic of the talk is beware of complaining. Beware of complaining. And I'll begin with an ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجًا مِّنْهُمْ زَهْرَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ وَرِزْقُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. Allah says what means, and strain not your eyes in longing for that which we have given for enjoyment to various groups amongst the people. It is nothing but the splendor of worldly life by which we test them. And the provision of your Lord is better and more enduring. Sheikh al-Imam Abdurrahman ibn Nasr al-Sa'di, he said in his commentary on this verse, he said, it means, do not stare out of amazement, and do not keep looking with an approving eye and a crestfallen heart. What does that mean, crestfallen heart? It means you see somebody with something, and because you don't have it, you're what? You're like depressed, dejected. It's like somebody died because you don't have this material thing this other person has. Allah says, don't look at the people like that, and don't look at the things that they have like that. At what people are enjoying of worldly gains, such as tasty food and drink and fancy clothing and adorned homes and attractive mates. Man has a beautiful wife, the brother's what? Crestfallen. Woman has a beautiful husband, handsome husband, and what? Other women are what? Crestfallen. It's like it shouldn't be like that. It says, for all of that is from the splendor of worldly life, which the souls of deceived ones rejoice over, and which the eyes of the negligent gawk at, and which the wrongdoers enjoy, without thinking of the hereafter. Then it all passes by quickly, and disappears, and destroys those who love and adore it, and they regret at a time when regret is of no benefit. So these worldly things that the people have, they have it. And you're crestfallen. A person has a nice car, and then he gets in a wreck. Here today, gone tomorrow. Person has a nice home, it burns down. Here today, gone tomorrow. Person has nice clothing, it what? It wears out. The clothing wears out. They have money one day, and then they're bankrupt the next day. But for some people, that's what? It just burns their heart that they don't have these material things which are here today and gone tomorrow. And the people who love it, when it's gone, they're filled with what? Regret. Because they realize that what? These things what? They don't have any what? Lasting benefit. And the thing that has lasting benefit, they ignored it because they were too busy chasing after these things. So then he says, then when they come forward at the time of resurrection, they will know what they were upon, and that Allah had only placed it as a trial and test to see who would be deceived by it, and how numerous are those who are deceived. He went on to say, rahimahullah ta'ala, and when Allah says, the provision of your Lord is better and more enduring, it means two types of provisions. The immediate provisions of your Lord, which include knowledge, faith, and righteousness, and the deferred ones, provisions of everlasting pleasures, and a good life in the proximity of Allah in paradise. These other worldly provisions are superior in every way to the worldly provisions Allah bestowed upon some people, and they are more lasting than the car, than the money, than the house, than the clothes, because they never expire. They never wear out, and they never get terminated. There's never what? Like a string that ultimately gets what? That gets cut off. But unfortunately, some people, or most people, are, as Allah said, بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. But you prefer the worldly life, although the hereafter is better and more enduring. Then the Sheikh, he concluded his commentary by saying, this verse teaches us that if a person sees himself craving, longing, coveting the adornments and trinkets of this world, and is overly inclined towards them, he or she should remind his or herself of what lies ahead and awaits them from the provisions of their Lord. So an alarm should go off and say to them, I'm losing focus. I'm focusing on the wrong thing. When you find yourself just so crestfallen because somebody has something, you got to wake up from that. Say, alarm should go off and say, hey, I'm losing focus. I'm focusing on the wrong things. And they should make an honest comparison between the two. Which is better, a mansion in paradise or a colonial in some cul-de-sac, in some subdivision somewhere in America? I'm asking you, which is better? A mansion whose bricks are made of gold and silver and the mortar is musk. Rivers of milk and wine and water and honey. Is that not better than a house with a swimming pool? We have to really make an honest comparison and take honest stock of ourselves. Elsewhere in the Quran, Allah says, as for man, when he tries him with generosity and favors him, he says, puffed up, my Lord has honored me. So if Allah gives him things, he thinks, oh, I'm special. Allah loves me because I have a house, because I have a car, because I have money, because I have this thing, because I have the new iPad, because he thinks because of these things, Allah loves him and is pleased with him. But when Allah tries him by restricting his provisions, he says, my Lord has humiliated me. So if Allah doesn't give him these things, withhold these things, he thinks, oh, Allah doesn't like me. Allah hates me. Allah is humiliating. Allah is punishing me because he didn't give me an iPad, didn't give me this, didn't give me that. Allah says, nay, but you treat not orphans with kindness and generosity. You urge not the feeding of the poor. You devour inheritance with immense greed, and you love money too much. And this is from Surah Al-Fajr, this is the 89th surah, verses 15 to 20. Again, Sheikh Abd'Llah ibn Nasr al-Sa'di, he commented on this surah and he said, or this verse and he said, or these verses and he said, here Allah the Exalted informs us of the nature of man. He is ignorant and unjust and does not know the outcome of things. He thinks that whatever condition he is currently in will last forever. And he thinks that Allah's honoring and favoring him in this world is an indication of his status and closeness to Allah in the hereafter. And when Allah tries him and retracts his provision, such that he has only his needs with nothing extra, subhanallah. He has what? His needs. But he doesn't have what? His wants. And in his mind, Allah has wronged him. Allah has been unfair. Allah is mistreating me because I have everything I need, but I don't have everything I want. Then this, in his mind, is a denigration from Allah. Allah is humiliating me. Allah is putting me down. So Allah responds to man's erroneous estimation by saying what means, no, not everyone I have granted my favors in this world is honored by me. Allah, and isn't it true that Allah may humiliate someone who has lots of what? Lots of money. They're famous, they're influential, and Allah hates them, and the wealth that he gives them is actually what? A noose that he's tying around that person's neck so they can hang themselves with it. He's humiliating them with what? With wealth. And not everyone whose provision I have restricted do I intend to humiliate by doing so. Consider that the Prophet and many of his companions lived what? An austere lifestyle. And some of them were very what? Were very poor. Many of his companions were very poor, but they were the people who Allah loved the most, and the Prophet described them as what? The best of people. Rather, both wealth and poverty, having a surplus of things and going without things, are tests from Allah and trials which he puts his servants through to see who is grateful to him and who is patient. so that he may reward them a great reward for their gratitude and patience, as opposed to those who become puffed up with pride, are ungrateful and complain. So they receive a painful punishment. So you have people who, they have what they need, but they're dissatisfied. So in that case, they're being ungrateful. They're being ungrateful because Allah could even deprive them of what? Of what they need. But unfortunately, verses like these and their implications are ignored by many of us. The world and worldly things have become the barometer by which we gauge a good life versus a bad life. And the primary factor that will make us happy or sad. People, when they have things, they're what? They're happy. And when they don't have things, they're sad. When you give them something, they're happy. When you tell them no, they're what? They're sad. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Our happiness and sadness shouldn't be connected to what things. And the Prophet said in the hadith, Ta'isa Abd'Llah, Ta'isa Abd'Llah. He said, woe, punishment, wail to the person who what? Who worships the dollar. The one who worships the cent. The one who loves what? Fine clothing and fine furniture and finery and toys and trinkets and things. And he went on to what? To make dua against him. That the person should not be the person who what? My happiness and sadness, I'm like the tide. The ebbs and flows are dependent upon what? Upon having and not having. There is too much complaining, brothers and sisters, in the Muslim community. Too much complaining. You got people who they will always find negative in something what? Something good. And they struggle to find the positive in anything. So you know how they talk about how, for example, every dark cloud has a silver lining? No, they're the people who what? There's a silver cloud and they find what? The darkness in it. The defect. That's how they are. You take them, you go to a nice restaurant. Say, oh man, this is the finest restaurant in Colombia. What do you think about the food? It's good, but it's too hot. But it's too cold. But it's too spicy. But I don't like the service. But I don't like the decor. But there's always what? Something negative. We always what? Find something to what? To complain about. And we rarely look on the bright side and seldom see how much we have or how good we have it. Because we're always looking at what others have that we don't. Or how much better off they are than us. That's our problem. We're always looking at the people who are what? Above us instead of looking at the people who what? Are below us. That's a big problem. The Prophet said, don't look at the people who are above you. Look at people who are what? Below you. Because when you look at the people above you, you become what? Ungrateful. Oh, I don't have this. I don't have that. You're ungrateful. When you look at the people below you, you say what? Oh man, look, I have this and I have this. You become what? Grateful. You have gratitude. So a practical example of this, once a scholar, he was asked by a woman who considered herself unattractive. The woman writes, she says, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. With a dark complexion, acne-prone skin, misaligned teeth, and average height, I consider myself ugly. So does that mean Allah hates me? So it's as if what? It's as if when the Prophet said, Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty, he was only talking about what? Worldly beauty. And the beauty that's perceived or in the eyes of what? Of man. What about the beauty that what? Allah sees. Which goes beyond what? The perfect nose and the perfect lips and the perfect eyes and it goes beyond that. And what's beautiful to Allah may not necessarily be beautiful to what? You and I, because of our what? Our warped perceptions. So for example, when somebody comes and they have bad breath, do you like that? You don't like that. But Allah loves the foul smell of the breath of the one who's what? Fasting. So there's a whole different perception for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she says what? I'm ugly because what? I don't have good teeth and because of my dark complexion and my skin is acne prone, etc. So does that mean Allah hates me? I have heard taunts about my looks for a long time. I have been through a lot of social pressure because of how I look and remain depressed most of the time. Some have even blatantly expressed their concern that I will never find a husband who will marry me because of my looks. What is my standing in Islam regarding all of this? Since Islam encourages men to marry beautiful women, I cannot thoroughly blame others for their concern because they are in a way quoting the Quran. But then again, where is my fault? What is my sin? I didn't choose to be ugly. And how does one justify the fact one is rejected socially, rejected for jobs, rejected for marriage proposals, all because one is not good looking enough? Where is Allah's justice? A'udhu billah. A'udhu billah. Where is Allah's justice in this when He has created all of us equally? So now the woman is questioning what? Allah's justice. Allah wronged me because He made me ugly, and He loves what? Beauty. And I can't get married, and no one will propose to me, and I can't get jobs, and I can't get this. Allah has been somehow, what? Unjust. I want to ask you, Allah gives, let's say you had a man, and he was very wealthy, and 100 people came to visit his home asking for charity. And He gave all of them $10,000. And He gave one of them $7,000. Would that man be unjust? Would he be unjust? No. Because He didn't have to give him what? He didn't have to give him anything. So how can Allah be unjust if whatever He gives you is more than what you're entitled to? Because you're not entitled to anything. So the scholar, he responded, he said, in part of his response, he said, "O maidservant of Allah, don't deprive yourself of the greatest gift, which is what? Allah's pleasure. Don't deprive yourself of Allah's pleasure by what? By being upset with the will of Allah, or by thinking evil of Him, or allowing your tongue to tire of remembering Him, praising Him, thanking Him, and turning to blaming Him and having a bad opinion of Him. If you are not beautiful in your mind, what did the non-Muslim woman who was deprived of Islam do with her beauty? While your Lord granted Islam to you." That's nothing too. We look at Islam like a niqmah. Islam is a curse. It's like a stain. It's like something we want to do what? We're scrubbing trying to get it off, but we can't get it off. Allah favored you with Islam. The best gift is better than any beauty, any money, any possession that anybody could have. And we're not satisfied with that. We don't feel a sense of what? Of being blessed and favored because we have Islam. We know Islam without things, it's nothing to us. So he said, where is she now if she has passed away? And where will she be tomorrow if she died upon disbelief? Will her beauty be of benefit to her on that day when neither wealth nor children will be of benefit except those who come to Allah with pure hearts? Would you really be pleased with the alternative? That you be beautiful and non-Muslim, and that she be ugly but Muslim? There are many similar questions you need to ask yourself and answer in light of your circumstances which have made you displeased with your Lord. Think about it. Would you rather trade, for example, you have a woman who has, for example, a man who showers her with gifts and lavish home and this, that, and the other thing. And you have other women who look at her and what? They're crestfallen. They long to have what she has. And all they can do is go on about what this person had. I went to her home and you should have saw the clothes in her closet. You should have saw what her husband gave her this and the jewelry that she has that. But the man is what? He's abusive. And he's unfaithful. It's like, would you rather be in that situation or have the husband who what? Who's a pauper, but he's what? He's pious or he, whatever. Vice versa. Would you rather have this guy, man, he has this wife and she's from Morocco. Oh, she's this and she's this. But no matter what he gives her, she's never what? Satisfied. And so the person is just living his life, running behind the dunya, trying to make more and more to what? To satisfy her, and she'll never be satisfied. Would you rather be with her or the woman who what? She's not from Morocco and she can't make, what is that dish that they make?
Couscous.
Couscous. Oh. She can't make couscous and but what? But she's content and satisfied with what? With whatever he gives. It's like we always think the grass is greener on the other side. We need to ask these questions. Would you really want the alternative? Would you really want the alternative? So the scholar also, what he did, he quoted a story. This is a beautiful story. I'm going to share it with you. And it's a story that was written by al-Ansari, rahimahullah ta'ala, on the authority of Abd'Llah ibn Muhammad, who said, I went out to the shore as a patrolman. He was on patrol. He was appointed to do some patrolling. And he says, when I arrived at the shore, I came upon an open area, and there was a tent on it. In the tent was a man who had no hands and legs, and he was hard of hearing and sight. He couldn't move any of his limbs except his tongue. And he kept repeating the words. Listen to Isma'uli hada. Listen to this. He said that the man could not, no hands, no legs, and what he did have of what? Of appendages, he couldn't what? He couldn't move those. The only thing he could move was what? His tongue. And with his tongue, he kept reciting, Allahumma awzi'ni an ahmadaka hamdan ukafi'u bihi shukra ni'matak allati an'amta biha alayya wa faddaltani ala kathiran mimman khalaqta tafdilan. So he says, O Allah, grant me the ability to praise you a praise by which I can sufficiently thank you for the kindnesses you have bestowed upon me. Kindnesses? He has no hands, no legs, paralyzed, and can only what? Move his tongue. But he's saying, he said, give me the ability to praise you sufficiently. Thank you sufficiently for the kindnesses you have bestowed upon me, and by which you have greatly favored me. He's somehow what? Superior and has it better over many whom you have created. Not one or two, but many people I have it what? I have it better than them. So then he said, I said by Allah, this is Abd'Llah ibn Muhammad. He said, I said by Allah, I will certainly go to this man and I shall certainly ask him about this speech and understanding, knowledge, or inspiration which has been inspired to him. Where do you get this from? So I approached the man and greeted him, and I said to him, I heard you and you were saying, O Allah, grant me the ability to praise you, a praise by which I can sufficiently thank you for the kindnesses you have bestowed upon me, and by which you have greatly favored me over many whom you have created. So what kindnesses from the kindnesses of Allah upon you are you praising him for? I'm asking you just out of curiosity, because when I look at you, I'm thinking your situation is desperate. Your situation is dire. So I'm asking you, what kindnesses is it that you're asking Allah to be able to praise him adequately for? And in what way did he favor you over others significantly that you need to thank him for it? He said, the man, don't you see what my Lord has done? By Allah, if he sent the sky to me as a fire which burned me, or ordered the mountains to crush me, or the oceans to drown me, or the earth to swallow me up, it would only cause me to be more grateful to my Lord for the favor of what? Of this tongue he bestowed upon me, and enabled me to what? To make his dhikr, to remember him. No calamity that befalls me would make me what? Not appreciate this what? This ni'mah. This is a great ni'mah. However, he said, O slave of Allah, since you have come to me, I do have a need of you. I need to ask you for a favor. He says, perhaps you see me in the state I'm in. I cannot harm or benefit myself. But don't fret for me. I have a young son who comes to me at the time of prayer and helps me do my ablution. And when I become hungry, he feeds me. And if I am thirsty, he gives me drink. I'm in good state. Only I haven't seen him I haven't seen him for the last 3 days. So would you kindly look for him on my behalf? May Allah have mercy upon you. I just want you to do this one thing, because I have a son. He takes care of me. He washes me. He helps me to do my prayer. El-hayatu jamila. Everything is good. Life is great. But I just need you to find him because I haven't seen him in 3 days. So Abd'Llah ibn Muhammad, he said, no creature could fulfill the need of another, which is greater in war with Allah than a need similar to yours. So I set out looking for the young boy. And I hadn't gone far before I came by a small sand hill. And behold, I found the boy who had been preyed upon by a wild beast, which ate his flesh and tore him to what? To shreds. I did istirja. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And I said to myself, how am I going to be able to face this man with a gentle face? Okay, now shuf. Lost his hands. Lost his legs. Paralyzed. Could only use what? His tongue. Totally depend on who? On his son. To wash him for prayer. To feed him and to give him drink. And the son gets killed. Okay? So he said, I have to go back and tell him. How can I tell him this? As I was heading towards him, the words of remembrance of Ayyub, the prophet of Allah, came to my heart. So when I reached him, I greeted him and he responded and said, are you not my companion? I said, yes. He said, what did you do about my need? Now why is he asking, are you the guy? Are you the guy? Because he can't what? Can't see. He says, are you the guy who came and left? So he said, yes. He said, what did you do about my need? Did you find my son? I said, are you more honorable in the sight of Allah, or was Ayyub the prophet? He said, of course, Ayyub the prophet. I said, do you know what his Lord did with him? Do you know what Allah did with Ayyub? Did he not test him in his wealth, his family, his children? He said, yes. I said, how did he find him? How did Allah find Ayyub? He said he found him patient, grateful, and praising. I said he was not pleased with that for him until his relatives and loved ones deserted him. So he kept praising Allah and thanking Allah even though his situation was dire, and his relatives got fed up with him, and they what? They left him. So he was abandoned, Ayyub. He said, yes. I said, how did his Lord find him then? He said he found him patient and praising. But make it short. Get on with it. Did you find my son or not? I said to him, the young boy you sent me in search of, I found him in a sand hill, having been preyed upon by a beast which had eaten his flesh. May Allah increase you. He said, فَعَظَّمَ اللَّهُ لَكَ الْأَجْرِ وَأَلْهَمَكَ الصَّبْرِ. He said, may Allah increase for you your reward, and may He inspire you with patience. What do you think the man did? You think the man did? The tested man said, listen to this. He said, praise be to Allah. He's thanking Allah, even in this situation. Thanking Him for what? Who did not create from my progeny creations who would disobey Him. He's thanking Allah that Allah gave him what? Obedient children. Even though something terrible happened to him, alhamdulillah, he died upon what? Islam. He didn't die upon kufr. He wasn't disobedient. He wasn't a fasiq. I have something else to what? To praise for. Here's a person who's always looking on what? On the bright side. Always finding the silver lining in the what? Dark cloud. Not like us. Oh, the restaurant's good, but I don't like the decor. Oh, food's too hot. Food's too cold. Food's medium. Should be hotter. We always got something negative to say. Here's a person who finds what? Finds the positive even in this great calamity. Then he did istirja. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And he himself, he breathed a sigh and what? And died. I said, indeed to Allah we belong, and to Him is our return. What a huge calamity before me. A man like this, if I were to leave him, the beast would eat him. And if I stay, I won't be able to harm or benefit him. So I covered him in a cloak which was over him, and sat at his head and cried. When I went back to my post and night fell, I put my head down and saw him in a dream, in a garden from the gardens of paradise, wearing 2 garments from the garments of paradise, while reciting the revelation which means, peace be upon you for what you patiently endured, and excellent is the final home. I said, aren't you my companion? Aren't you the guy? Aren't you the one in the tent? He said, yes. I said, how did you receive this? How did you get these gifts from Allah? He said, verily with Allah are levels that cannot be attained except with patience at times of trial and gratitude at times of prosperity, along with the fear of Allah. Listen to this, ya ikhwani wa khawati. He said, there are levels with Allah that we can't attain unless we have three things. Patience at the time of trial, gratitude at the time of prosperity, along with the fear of Allah, the mighty and majestic, in private and in public. So there's some takeaways here, and I'll share those with you. The first one, no matter how bad things get, they could always be what? Worse. They could always be worse. And this again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. Find yourself in the lesson. Don't look around and say, yeah, Abd'Llah, things could all... No, look at yourself. No matter how bad you think you have it, it could always be what? Worse. Number two, no matter how bad things are, there is always something to be thankful for. Always something to be thankful for. The man's son died, and he found something to be what? To be thankful for. And you should say Alhamdulillah without what? Without ifs or buts. Because we always have a disclaimer. Yeah, Alhamdulillah, it's a nice restaurant, but there should be no but. There's no but. Alhamdulillah, best. That's it. Number three, no matter how bad things are, we shouldn't complain. Either say something positive or what? Or be quiet. Say something positive or be quiet. As the Prophet said in the hadith, مَنْ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لَيَصْمُتْ. Whoever believes in Allah last day, let him say something good or what? Or be quiet. Number four, the blessings of deen. The blessing of deen is greater than any worldly thing we may lose. The fact that you have Islam is the greatest blessing anyone can have. Look at the man. When he lost his hands, lost his legs, was paralyzed, and could only use his tongue, he what? He said, this tongue by which I remember Allah is what? Is the greatest blessing. Even if Allah drowned me, even if Allah caused the sky to rain fire upon me. The blessing of what? Of the deen is the greatest blessing. When he lost his son, praise be to Allah who let him die upon what? Islam, and gave me obedient progeny. Some people are happy if their son is a fasiq, if he what? If he's a doctor and he makes a lot of money. They're happy. They're proud of him. You know my son? He's the #1 neurosurgeon in the United States. This guy gets called and gets what do they call it? What's the word? He gets consulted on these different complex operations. Does he pray? No, he doesn't believe. In fact, he married a Buddhist and converted to her religion. But I'm proud of him, though. I'm proud of him. How you mean proud? They're proud. Why? Because what? In qalabat al-mawazin. Because what? The barometer, everything is what? Been turned upside down. And so we're proud of someone who has achievements in the dunya, but they have what? No deen. Here's a person who lost his son, who was totally dependent upon him to what? To eat and drink and to clean himself. And he was happy because what? He died upon Islam. ثُمَّ ذَلِكَ, the true believer has two distinct qualities by which he or she can be recognized. You want to know if you're a believer? Go home and look yourself in the mirror. You want to know if you're a believer? Patience in times of adversity. Things are not going my way. Am I patient? Gratitude in times of prosperity. Things are going good. Am I what? Thankful. Am I truly thankful? No, we're the people who what? Yeah, I have this, but I wish I had that. Or, oh, sister so-and-so has this, and she had a huge walk-in closet. It was as big as our bedroom, and she had this and this. This is how people what? This is how people show their ingratitude, even in times of what? Prosperity. So this is what I wanted to share. And again, I mentioned what I said in the beginning. Find yourself in the lesson, because that's how we're going to get better. Any questions, any comments, any complaints, any critiques?
So basically, you said the guy was looking for his son for 3 days. That means like he didn't eat for 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what. Sheikh?
No complaints over here.
Alhamdulillah.
I have a question.
تفضل Sheikh Habib.
So we're going according to this. Would you say that like being a food critic would be an impermissible job?
A food critic?
Yeah. And your job is to complain about the food or to pick it apart.
Well, I mean, I don't know, Habib. I don't know. That's a good hypothetical, but I don't know. Again, I think it's different from a person who, because again, this is a hypothetical, but let's just, for a person who's a food critic, he's trying to tell people, give people, I guess, advice about a certain restaurant in terms of what? The food they serve, the decor, the service, all those things.
Okay.
So I don't think it's the same as a person who, like you and I, go to a restaurant and it's on your dime, and all I do the whole time is talk about what? How bad it is, or how it's not this, and how it's not that, and so on and so forth. That's a little bit different than a person who what? It's his job to give people advice about the quality of a restaurant.
You want to answer those questions from last week?
Yeah, we can, I guess. We'll take one. I'll take one of them, I guess. All right, so one of the questions that came on the group was about whether or not al-ha'il, the woman who's on her menstrual period, if she can touch the Quran. And also, by extension, can she recite the Quran while she's on her menses? And so actually, this question is actually two questions in one. And this is important for us when we come to these masail al-fiqhiyya, that we're able to what? Compartmentalize. That basically, you can't take two things and mix them all together and start studying an issue and you don't separate between the two, because why? If it's two separate issues, they could have two separate what? They could have two separate what? Rulings. And if you're not daqiq, if you're not very precise, you end up what? You'll end up combining two things, conflating two things, which need to be what? Separated. So we need to pay attention to one thing, is that you have two issues here. Touching the Quran and reading without what? Without touching it. Like, for example, reading it from your memory, okay? Or reading it what? Without touching it. The second thing we need to pay attention to before we answer is that what we're talking about. What are we talking about? We're talking about al-Mus'haf al-Arabi. We're talking about what? The Quran, which is entirely what? Arabic and the words of Allah. We're not talking about the translated meanings of the Quran. Or a book, which is what? Which is basically explaining, interpreting, expounding on the meanings of the Quran, where the words of Allah are mixed with the words of men. And sometimes the words of men are what? Even more than the words of Allah. So when we talk about, can a woman touch the Quran, what are we talking about? The Quran, which is entirely Arabic, the Mus'haf, right? We're not talking about Yusuf Ali or the Noble Quran or anything like that, even though it has some Arabic in it. The third thing is that when we talk about al-mas, when we talk about touching the Quran, we're talking about touching the Mus'haf bila ha'il, without what? Without a barrier between the hand and the actual what? The actual Mus'haf. So if there's a barrier between the hand and the Mus'haf, we don't call that what?
Touching.
Mess. And that's not what we're talking about. When we're talking we call it touching. That's not what we're talking about when we say, what is the ruling of a woman touching the Quran? Because if there's a ha'il, then she's not actually what? Touching it. There's a barrier between her hand and the Mus'haf. She's not actually touching it. But the fourth thing we have to pay attention to is that we have to always follow in these masail. We have to follow the Quran and the Sunnah as understood by who? Ashab Rasulullah. Because nobody understood it better than them. So it's critical in these masail that we just don't stop with the Quran and Sunnah. A person will read the Quran and they won't find a verse that talks about touching the Quran. They'll read the hadith and they won't find a hadith that talks about it. And so then they'll say, oh, there's no proof. We can't just stop there. Because we have to look at what aqwal ashab Rasulullah, look at the statements of the companions of the Messenger of Allah, and see what they say. Because their understandings and their interpretations are what? Are also what? A hujjah, are also a proof which we have to follow. طيب, I kind of conflated two, so those are both. We have to follow the Quran and Sunnah as understood by the companions, and also their statements are what? Are a hujjah. Their statements are what? A hujjah, especially if they what? If they agree on something. Last but not least, whatever, pay attention to this one. Whatever we say about the person who has the minor impurity, al-muhdith hadathan asghar, whatever we say about him is also going to be true about the ha'il min babi awla. You guys understand that? That basically whatever we say about the person who's muhdith hadathan asghar, he has the minor impurities, to say the minor impurity, the impurity which requires what? Wudu. The same thing applies to what? The woman who's what? Who's on her menses, min babi awla. It's even more applicable to what? Her. So for example, we say that the person who has minor impurity, they can't what? They can't pray. This is also true for who? The haid, min babi awla. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, Ama alimta an al-haid. I'm sorry, and al-mar'a idha hadat lam tusalli wa lam tasum. He said, are you not aware that the woman, when she is on her menstrual period, she doesn't pray and she doesn't what? Fast. But we cannot make an analogy between the woman who is ha'il, the woman who's on her menses, and the woman who's what? Or the woman or the man who's what? Who's junub. They're in a state of basically major impurity. They're sexually impure. Why can't we make an analogy? Because the two are different. The one who is sexually defiled can raise that, can lift that ban, lift that state by what? By making ghusl. But the woman who's high cannot do what? Cannot lift her state. So those two are not analogous. So you got to compartmentalize. Whatever we say about the one who needs to make wudu, we say about who? The high. But the one who is junub, there's no what? There's no analogy between the two. So those are principles you have to have in mind when we go through the issue. But let's talk about al-mas really quickly. And let me say a disclaimer. The official opinion of the masjid might be something different than what I say. And if you were taught differently, then go with what you were taught. But somebody asked me the question, I'm going to answer the question according to what I was taught, and then it's up to you to decide. But if I'm contradicting the official madhab, then I'm not trying to do that. Alright, so that being said, there's a hadith collected by al-Athram with Daraqutni on the authority of Amr ibn Hazm, in which the Prophet, in which he said, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam kataba ila ahl al-Yaman kitaban wa fihi wa la yamassu al-Quran illa tahir. Amr ibn Hazm, in this hadith, he said that the Prophet wrote to the people of Yemen. He wrote a kitab, like a writing, a letter, and he was telling them about the deen. Telling them about principles of the deen. They were new Muslims, and he wanted to tell them about what their deen was. And in that kitab, he wrote to them, and no one should touch the Quran except one who is what? Who's in a state of purity. Someone who is pure. Actually, the word tahir, pure. Al-Bani, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book Irwa al-Ghalil, he authenticates this hadith and says that there's a lot of turuq, all the turuq are da'ifa, but altogether, this hadith is what? Is sahih. It's an authentic hadith which we can say the Prophet actually what? Said. But huna ishkal, he said there's a problem though. Because the word tahir, it has what? Itlaqat. It could be interpreted a number of different ways, right? He said one meaning of tahir is it could mean what? The person is pure of what? A shirk. Meaning they're not what? A kafir. They're a believer. But that believer could be a believer who has on his body somewhat? Some najasa, some impurity. Or it could be a believer who doesn't have any najasa on him, but he's impure because of a minor impurity. He needs to make what? Wudu. And he said it could also be the one who's free of what? Major and minor impurities. He doesn't have any najasa, doesn't have any minor impurity, doesn't have any what? Major impurity. It could be also that person. All those are included in the meaning of what? Tahir. And there's a qa'idah, there's a principle from this, that the scholars mention, which they say, النص إذا تطرق إليه احتمال بطل الاستدلال به. They say a text, if it's what? If it has multiple possible interpretations, and we're not sure which one it is, then we say what? We say you just have to throw it out and look for other evidence. Okay, you can't use that hadith as evidence. But النص إذا تطرق إليه احتمال بطل الاستدلال به. Okay, it's a qaida in the fuqaha. So now they say we don't know which one it is, so we act as if what? This nas doesn't exist. But then some people say, whoa, Nelly, hold up, go back to what we said earlier. We said that we have to understand the Quran and Sunnah in light of who? They understand the Sahaba. So before we just throw it out, we need to see what they said. Because if they said it means A, B, C, or D, then that would be what? The correct interpretation, and we have to what? Apply the hadith. So when we look at that, as mentioned by Al-Albani and other scholars, we find that the Sahaba, they were of the opinion that no one should touch the Quran unless they're what? In a state of what? Of purity. So in Al-Albani he mentions, on the authority of Sa'd ibn Waqqas, that he told his son, who was holding the Mus'haf, he told him, لَعَلَّكَ مَسَّسْتَ ذَكَرَكَ. He said, perhaps you have touched what? Your private part. He said, yes, O my father. So he said, go and what? Make wudu and don't touch the Quran, and you're not in wudu. This is from who? Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Sahabi. It's also been mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah. Wa alaykum salam. It's also been mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah in the 11th volume of Majmu' al-Fatawa. He said, هذا قول الصحابة بلا خلاف بينهم. He said, this is the opinion of what? All the companions without what? Any difference amongst them. So the companions are of the opinion that what? No one should touch the Mus'haf unless they're what? In a state of what? Purity. Which means what? Since we said that we can say that what? Whatever we say about the one who's in need of wudu can also be said about the ha'id. Then if the one who needs wudu can't touch the Mus'haf, then what? The ha'id cannot touch what the Mus'haf. According to who? The Sahaba. This is what? Their ijma' according to Ibn Taymiyyah. طيب. So that's what? Al-mas. That's what? Touching the Quran. So what about tilawa? What about reciting the Quran and she's ha'id? طيب. Some people, they say she can't touch it. She can't recite it while she's in a state of what? Her menses. Some people say that. There's difference between amongst the scholars about that. And what they do is they quote a hadith or an athar, a narration from Ali, radiallahu anhu, the caliph, Khalifa al-Rashid. They said, أن عليا توضأ ثم قرأ شيئا من القرآن ثم قال هذا لمن ليس بجنب فأما الجنب فلا ولا آية. So they quote this athar from Ali and they say this is the proof that a ha'id, a woman on her menses, can't recite the Quran. She can't even recite it. عن ظهر القلب. She can't even recite just from her memory. They say why? Because Ali radiallahu anhu, once he made what? He made wudu. And then he recited some Quran. And he said this is for the one who's not junub, who's not sexually defiled. As for the one who's sexually defiled, then he can't recite the Quran, not even what? Not even one verse. So they say, the woman who's ha'id can't recite the Quran. What do we say to that, Yashabab? How do we answer that? How do we respond? Go back to, you can't make an analogy. Remember what I said in the beginning? That's why I said you got to have these qawa'id. What did I say in the beginning? That you can't make an analogy between what? Al-janaba wal-hayd. You can't make sexually defiled and menses are not the same thing. So a woman who's on her menses, just like the man or woman who doesn't have wudu, can do what? Can recite the Quran without what? Without touching it. But they can't what? Touch it until they're what? Until they're purified. So that's the answer for that. And this was confirmed on the authority of Ali and also on the authority of what? Umar. That the junub can't do what? Cannot recite the Quran. So we also got another mas'ala in that as well. If a person is in state of janaba, they can't what? They can't recite the Quran, let alone touch it. Any questions, any comments, any complaints? Fadli.
I have another question, kind of related to that. If a woman has had surgery where part of her reproductive organs have been removed, like, she has...
I didn't hear the...
If a woman has like a hysterectomy or something, if she still gets bleeding every month,
Uh-huh.
does that count as her period, or does that not count as blood that comes from her period?
Yeah, basically what the scholars say is that the asl for dam, if it comes from the vagina, the asl, the original rule of that dam is it's hayd. I'm sorry, hayd.
Okay.
It's the menses, yeah.
Okay.
Can you quickly just touch on the part that we spoke about with Ibn Umar?
Uh-huh.
Clarify from last week's class.
Which one?
The hadith we spoke.
Okay, so one of the questions that came as a follow-up to last week's class, we talked about the different things that make, and I actually brought candy because I'm going to ask you guys questions, but people turned up late, so missed out on that. But at any rate, one of the things we talked about that breaks wudu is if a man touches what? His private parts without a hayd, without anything, a barrier between it. So now, we mentioned that this issue, there's some difference of opinion based upon what? Two hadith, which are somewhat contradictory, or they're apparently contradictory. So one of them is the hadith of Busra, in which she said, the Prophet said, "Man massa dhakarahu falyatawadda." Whoever touches his private part, let him make wudu. You have the other hadith of Talq ibn Ali, in which the Prophet said to a man, "Innama huwa bid'atun." He asked him, "Do I have to make wudu if I touch my private?" He said, "Innama huwa bid'atun mink." He said, "La." "Innama huwa bid'atun mink." He said, "No, it's just what? It's just a part of you." So these hadiths seem to be apparently contradictory. So what the scholars do whenever you have something like that is they try to what? Reconcile. So one method of reconciliation is to say that it refers to what? The person who touched his private what? With shahwa. Okay? And that one's mardud. That method of reconciliation is mardud because there's no dalil that what? That shahwa plays any what? Any role in it. It plays any part of it. Then the second one that they use, they say it means if you touch it what? Intentionally. Versus if you touch it what? Inadvertently. Okay? And we say that's mardud. We say that's rejected. Why? Because there's a famous athar from Nafi' Ibn Umar that he said to his father, Ibn Umar, he said, "I noticed that when you make al-ghusl, you follow with what? You follow it with what? Wudu. But the ghusl suffices you wudu. So I want to know, why are you doing that?" He said, "Because sometimes I inadvertently touch what? Touch my private part." So Ibn Umar, his understanding is that what? This hadith about if you touch your private, you have to make wudu is applicable whether you do it what? Purposely, on purpose, intentionally, or what? Or inadvertently. So for that reason we say what? That neither one of those two methods of reconciliation is correct. And the correct reconciliation is what? Is that the hadith of Busra, it supersedes the hadith of Talq, and we mentioned why. One, the hadith of Talq, it has an illa, has some issues with it. Two, the hadith of Busra is what? Later. Three, the hadith of Busra is naqil and al-asl. It basically, it gives you a hukum which is different from what? The original hukum, and we always give precedence to that hadith. Also the hadith Busra is what we call, it is hadir, it's something that prohibits, and there's a qaida, al-hadir muqaddam al-mubih, that the hadith which prohibits is always given precedence over the hadith which gives what? Permission. Why? Because it's what? It's safer. It's safer, right? It's safer. All right, any questions? Anything else? Going once? Going twice? Let's pray. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammad.